A recent report from the Wall Street Journal highlights Sony's strategy for PlayStation 5, and boy is it juicy. I think they are employing the perfect plan to once again go and dominate the console space, and it's gotta be getting pretty scary if you're Microsoft. What's going on, everybody? It's GhostRobo, and this is really cool. Any nugget of next-gen info makes me happy. I was so hoping that Microsoft would jump the gun and launch their console in the spring 2020 window, something that worked really well for Nintendo Switch and something that would give them a clear, undeniable advantage until PlayStation 5 launched in the holidays, but they opted to not do that. Instead, they focused on Game Pass and Halo, 8K and ray tracing, but guess what? Sony also has 8K and ray tracing, and guess what else they have? A ton of exclusives and a ton of very important third-party partnerships. In this article, they talk about how Sony views Microsoft as its main competitor for next gen, and rightfully so. They're also keeping an eye on Google as a mid to long-term threat, but they aren't really paying too much attention to Nintendo as they view that audience to be far younger than what PlayStation is targeting. Now, the reason for this is that they believe gamers purchasing an expensive next-gen console want graphics-intensive games. They want the big tentpole titles, and they want the best place to play them. They also want the place where you can play the most of the best, and that this gen has been PlayStation. Well, they're hoping to continue that trend by doubling down on exclusives, which personally I think is awesome. I know that in some areas of the industry, exclusives are viewed as a negative, something that separates gamers and keeps us all from playing every great game. But in terms of these console battles, in terms of deciding where to place your hard-earned dollars, exclusives are very important, and usually they yield the best gaming experiences. I, for one, love this emphasis on Sony-published joints because look what it's yielded this past generation. Games like Spider-Man, Infamous Second Son, Horizon Zero Dawn, and many, many more. A little game called God of War kind of won Game of the Year last year. And we're setting up a scenario where PlayStation 5 could launch with cross-gen versions of The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, plus get a new Horizon game to start things off, maybe a God of War soon after, and potentially even a new Uncharted. That is a lineup that is incredibly hard to contend with and probably impossible for Microsoft to match. Yes, they've gone out of their way to acquire a bunch of new studios, but can those studios put out titles at the caliber of the next God of War, of the next Last of Us, of the next Spider-Man, and whatever new IP they have cooking as well? Don't forget that Sony is incredibly effective at funneling money towards important third-party partnerships, securing exclusive DLC and early access for its console consumers. And if they continue to push dollars towards those tentpole franchises, things like Call of Duty, Madden, Ubisoft projects, it'll be an even bigger boon this coming generation. And if they decide to go even further and grab exclusives for games like BioShock and Starfield, how crazy cool will that be for the PlayStation faithful? They talk in this article about how appealing to the hardcore gamer is more important to Sony than appealing to everyone, which should come as music to your ears. It's definitely music to mine, as it means more awesome gaming experiences that I'll probably love, and more focus on the things that are important to me. The downside to this is that some indie developers feel snubbed by Sony, whereas they have a great relationship with Nintendo, a company that has shifted focus and champions indies like no other. But it's hard for me to argue with Sony's strategy in spite of how awesome some of 2019's best indies have been. Because if you think about it, do players really want to spend $600 on a new console and then go play Ape Out? Do they really want to spend $600 on a new console and then go play Katana Zero? Now, make no mistake, those are two of my favorite games of 2019. But if I just dropped $600 or whatever the final MSRP is for PlayStation 5, that's probably not where I'm looking first. I want something big, something bold, something bombastic, something that is beautiful and will take my breath away, transporting me to a whole new world through immersive visuals and extreme power. Now, the unspoken truth here is that no matter what Sony says, and no matter how much attention and or resources they divert towards smaller games, they're going to end up having a bunch of smaller projects available on their platform. The PlayStation brand is just too big to ignore. 100 million plus consoles this generation, you just can't avoid it. So they'll still get plenty of smaller titles. They'll still get all the big multi-platform games, which makes their strategy even smarter. because they don't have to spend time in that area. They can devote it to the exclusives, devote it to the tentpole AAA, and know that they're going to gobble up the rest just because of their size. That's not the nicest approach in my opinion, and I do wish Sony was a little friendlier with indie developers, but they can afford not to be, for better or worse. When you're pushing a box that can do 8K and ray tracing, of course you're going to target games that emphasize those features in the biggest way. Those are the experiences that are going to mesmerize gamers into opening their wallets and dumping over $500,000 into your brand. One analyst in the article does worry that Sony's obsession with the immense could lead to a shrinking variety and uniqueness. But Sony doesn't buy that for the aforementioned reasons. They're going to have almost every game on their platform no matter what they choose to do. So here we stand, a year and a half out from these new boxes, and Sony is really impressing me with their direction. I cannot wait to play the next games in their biggest franchises, and I cannot wait to see what they do next in terms of new IP. Does Microsoft have enough ammunition to go toe-to-toe? They're going to try to do so with a similarly powerful box in a similar time frame, putting forth their big exclusives like Halo and probably Fable eventually as well. They've acquired a bunch of studios to try and compete with Sony's stable. But will it be enough? Game Pass is an incredibly alluring alternative to the traditional way of acquiring games. But in order to make a major splash next gen, Microsoft will need a ton of software to fill that thing out. Now, I don't know their business model specifically, but I'm sure there's got to be a limit to how many titles they can sacrifice over to the Game Pass side. At some point, you probably want to charge $60 for your biggest products, and you probably want to try and really profit off of your million unit sellers. All of this should be setting off all of the alarms within Microsoft, because Sony seems prepped to make a massive move into the next generation, carrying the weight of a crushing victory in the current gen towards the future. And I'm not seeing anywhere near as much of the arrogance as we witnessed between the PS2 and PS3 generations. Sony seems a little bit older, a little bit wiser, at least so far. Soon we'll talk about the proposed PS5 launch lineup, but this should already have you incredibly excited, especially if you've loved any of the games that I've loved over the last 5 to 10 years. Because while other companies are focusing heavily on free-to-play and battle royale, Sony remembers the importance of single player. They remember the importance of narrative. They remember the importance of generation-defining games. They're trying to make exclusives that will reach your top 10 of all time list, not just take a ton of your time and a ton of your money. I'm insanely excited for next gen, as you can probably tell, but let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and hit that like button if you can't wait to hear more and see more about the next Xbox and the PlayStation 5. I've definitely got you covered. Until then though, everybody, thanks so much for watching. Have a fantastic day. Until next time, drink some hot chocolate, and we will see you all later.